I stared at my mother, hoping I had misheard her. My hands trembled as I gripped the polished oak table in the resort's private conference room. The same room where I had spent countless hours strategizing, planning, and saving this place from total financial ruin. What did she just say? Noah will be CEO, she repeated, her voice steady, as if she wasn't ripping my entire world apart. It just makes sense, Ava. My breath hitched. It makes sense? My voice cracked, but I forced myself to stay composed. I gave up everything to come back here and fix this resort. I'm the one who saved us from bankruptcy. I put my life in Miami on hold too. Ava, my father's tone was firm, laced with finality. Your contributions haven't gone unnoticed. But Noah, he has leadership potential. You're too detail-oriented, too caught up in the day-to-day. This resort needs someone with a vision for the bigger picture. Noah's smirk grew wider from across the table. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, completely relaxed, as if this wasn't the most insulting thing our parents had ever done to me. Don't take it personally, sis, he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. Someone's gotta handle the boring operational stuff while I work on expanding our brand. Expanding our brand? He had no clue what he was talking about. This wasn't just a business to me. It was my family's legacy, my childhood, my future, and I had spent the past year breathing life back into it while Noah was too busy drinking craft cocktails at rooftop bars in Miami. I swallowed back the lump in my throat, my pulse hammering against my ribs. You're making a mistake, Mom sighed, reaching for my hand as if she were the victim here. Ava, you need to understand, your brother has great ideas. He just needs guidance, and we believe he can really take the Ocean Crest Resort to the next level. Guidance? I scoffed, yanking my hand away. You mean hand-holding? He hasn't worked a single full shift here in his life. Meanwhile, I've spent every waking hour transforming this place into a success story. I built this. Every renovation, every upgrade, every strategic partnership, that was me. The words felt empty in the silence that followed. They weren't listening. They had never really listened. I glanced around the room. At the very walls I had redesigned. The lighting fixtures I had picked out. The sleek, modern aesthetic I had fought for when my parents wanted to keep things traditional. None of it mattered. I could have doubled the revenue, put the resort on the cover of every travel magazine in the country, and they still would have chosen Noah. I felt a slow, simmering burn deep in my chest. This wasn't just about business. This was about them never believing in me. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I could spend another 10 years proving myself, outperforming Noah in every way, and it still wouldn't be enough. A sharp knock on the door made me flinch. Sarah, the resort's longtime head of housekeeping, peeked in, her gaze flickering between us. She looked nervous, like she had overheard more than she should have. Sorry to interrupt, she said hesitantly, but the staff is waiting for the meeting. The meeting, the one where I was supposed to present the resort's best quarterly performance in years. My success story, the one they were now handing to Noah like it was a family heirloom he had always been entitled to. I clenched my jaw, inhaling slowly through my nose. Not here, not in front of the staff. With measured movements, I straightened my blazer and grabbed my tablet. I walked past my mother, past my father, past Noah's smug, self-satisfied expression, but as I reached the doorway, I hesitated just long enough to meet his gaze. You have no idea what you're doing, I said quietly, my voice like steel, and when this place starts falling apart under your leadership, don't come to me to fix it. Then I walked out, head held high, as the suffocating weight of betrayal settled deep in my bones. But even as I stepped into the conference room filled with staff who knew I was the one who had saved this resort, something inside me cracked. They weren't just giving Noah the CEO title. They were taking away everything I had built. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table anymore. I was going to build my own. I still remember the moment my father's voice cracked over the phone. The way his carefully composed businessman's tone faltered as he admitted the truth, the Ocean Crest Resort was weeks away from bankruptcy. Ava, we need you, he said, his voice raw, laced with a desperation I had never heard before. The bank is pressuring us. And if we don't turn things around, we could lose everything. I had been sitting in my high-rise office in Miami, staring at the city skyline. My morning coffee growing cold in my hands. I should have hesitated. I should have asked more questions. I should have realized what was really happening, that my parents didn't value me. Not in the way they valued Noah. But I didn't. Instead, I stood up, grabbed my coat, and made a decision that would change everything. I left behind my stable, high-paying job as a regional director for one of the most prestigious hotel chains in the country. I sold my condo, cashed in my savings, and booked a one-way ticket home. All because I believed my father when he said, "We need you." I arrived at Ocean Crest that same week, expecting to find my parents and Noah deep in strategy meetings, desperate to salvage what was left of the business. Instead, I found chaos. The lobby looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. The carpets were faded, the furniture was stained, and the reservation system was so outdated it still required manual check-ins. Manual check-ins. In 2024, when I stepped into the office, I found my mother scrolling through Facebook, my father poring over spreadsheets with numbers so grim they made my stomach turn. And Noah? Nowhere. That should have been my first warning. What's the game plan? I had asked, setting my suitcase down, ready to fight for our family's legacy. My father had sighed, rubbing his temples. We were hoping you could figure that out. I blinked. You have no plan? Silence. For the first time, I truly saw the fear in my father's eyes, the weight of impending failure pressing down on him. My mother wouldn't even meet my gaze. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, my mind racing. I should have run. I should have packed my bags and gotten on the next flight back to Miami. Instead, I stayed. I spent weeks tearing apart the resort's operations, picking through every mismanaged budget, every unnecessary expense, every failed marketing attempt. It was worse than I had imagined. The guest reviews were brutal, dated, overpriced, and dirty. Customer service is a joke. Wouldn't stay here again if it were free. The resort was bleeding money. I worked 16-hour days, fixing everything from the dysfunctional reservation system to the undertrained staff to the non-existent digital marketing. I leveraged my industry connections, reaching out to travel bloggers, sending promotions to past guests, single-handedly rebranding Ocean Crest. And it worked. The first month was damage control. The second month, we saw our first bump in occupancy. By month 4, we were fully booked for the summer season. For the first time in years, Ocean Crest wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. I did this. Me. Not my father. Not my mother. Not Noah. Me. And where was Noah while I was pouring my soul into saving our family's business? Living in Miami, I should have noticed the signs. The way my parents never acknowledged my sacrifices. How every time I showed them another record-breaking month, they smiled, nodded, and changed the subject. I told myself it didn't matter. That the success was enough. I was wrong. I wasn't saving this resort for me. I was saving it for them. For my parents. For the same people who would later sit across from me, smile, and tell me that Noah, who hadn't lifted a finger, was now in charge. Looking back, I should have known. The call that had pulled me back home? It wasn't a call for help. It was a trap. The day everything unraveled, I was standing in my office, flipping through the latest financial reports. The numbers were extraordinary, a 200% increase in bookings. Record-breaking revenue. 5-star reviews flooding in from travel blogs and influencers. I should have been celebrating. Instead, a cold sense of unease crept up my spine. There was something off. A few days ago, I had overheard snippets of hushed conversations between my parents. Whispers, half-sentences, my father avoiding eye contact at dinner. My mother's nervous glances. I had dismissed it at first, chalking it up to stress. I should have known better. Then Noah waltzed into my office like he owned the place, grinning like the cat that had swallowed the canary. "Hey, Ava," he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk, kicking his feet up casually. "Big news. Mom and Dad want to make an announcement tonight at the staff meeting. You might want to be there." Something in the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. I placed my pen down carefully. What kind of announcement? His grin widened. "You'll see." And that was it. That was all he said before standing up, walking out of the office like nothing had happened, leaving me staring after him, my mind racing. I knew something was wrong. I knew Noah. I had known him all my life. And if he was smirking, it meant something was about to happen. Something I wasn't going to like. By the time the staff meeting rolled around, the unease in my gut had solidified into dread. I stood at the back of the room as my father cleared his throat. Stepping up in front of our employees, his hands clasped together, my mother stood beside him, smiling tightly. And Noah? He was in the center of it all. This has been a huge year for Ocean Crest. My father began, his voice warm and full of practiced authority. Thanks to the dedication of our staff, we've turned things around. We've seen record growth. And now, as we move into this new phase, we want to ensure that the future of this resort is in the best possible hands. He paused. I could feel every pair of eyes in the room flicker to me. I straightened my shoulders, preparing myself. I had done everything for this resort. I had poured my blood, sweat, and soul into saving it. This was the moment they would finally acknowledge it. Then my father smiled. And that's why, starting next month, Noah will be stepping into the role of CEO. Silence. The air was sucked out of the room. I went still, frozen in place, the words slamming into me like a physical blow. Noah, CEO. My ears roared with the weight of it, drowning out whatever else my father was saying. I saw Noah smirk, his arms crossed over his chest. Like this was funny. Like this was just another one of his games. My chest tightened. I waited for someone to correct it. Waited for my parents to acknowledge what I had done. Waited for them to say my name. They never did. The meeting ended. Applause. Some hesitant, some forced. A few of the senior staff members, the ones who knew what I had done for this resort, looked horrified. Sarah, our head of housekeeping, caught my eye across the room. She didn't clap. Neither did some of the other employees who had stood beside me when this hotel was on the verge of collapse. But that didn't matter. Because Noah was beaming, shaking hands, basking in the spotlight. And my parents? They looked proud. I turned on my heel and walked out, my vision blurring at the edges. The betrayal burned deep, slicing through my ribs like a blade. I had given everything to this place. I had saved this place. And they had just handed it to him. I barely made it back to my office before slamming the door shut. My breath coming fast and hard. My hands shook as I grabbed the edge of my desk, fingernails digging into the wood. I had been used. They had brought me here, not because they valued me, but because they needed me to do the dirty work. And now that the hotel was saved, now that it was thriving, they were discarding me like I was nothing. Like I had been a tool, a temporary fix. How could they do this to me? How could my own family betray me like this? A sharp knock rattled my door. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I wasn't sure I could speak without my voice cracking under the weight of my fury. A pause. Then Noah's voice, muffled but mocking. Come on, sis. Don't be mad. It's just business. 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 My breath hitched. The air felt thick, suffocating. My hands clenched into fists. I had saved this hotel. I had done this. And they had given it to him? My mind whirred through 1,000 thoughts. 1,000 plans. 1,000 emotions. But beneath the rage, beneath the betrayal, something else clicked into place. Something colder. Something sharper. Noah thought this was over. He thought I would accept it. He thought I would slink away quietly, humiliated. But he had made one fatal mistake. He had underestimated me, and he had no idea what was coming next. The first real crack in Noah's reign didn't come with some grand catastrophe. It started small, a missed deadline, an overlooked order, a single, misplaced decision that sent a ripple through the entire hotel. At first, he brushed it off. He had always been the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, the one who could fail a class and still get a pat on the back, who could get fired from a job and have it blamed on a bad boss. But this time, there was no safety net. This time, his mistakes were too big to ignore. It started with the renovations. One of the biggest reasons Ocean Crest had made its comeback was because I had modernized everything, down to the last detail. I had researched every supplier, every contractor, every piece of furniture. I had planned everything meticulously to keep our budget balanced while making the hotel a premier luxury destination. And Noah? He threw it all away. He wanted his name on something. A legacy he could claim. And so, he gutted everything. A full redesign. A bold new direction. Except, he had no idea what he was doing. He fired the vendors I had worked with for months, replacing them with his friends. The kind of people who promised him deals and exclusivity in exchange for a handshake and a beer. But those deals were built on air. He signed contracts without reading the fine print. Overpaid for materials that weren't even up to code. The moment the construction team walked out, citing breach of contract, I knew exactly what had happened. I had warned him. I had told him that cutting corners would cost us. That you can't run a hotel on ego alone. But Noah? Noah didn't listen. And now, the once perfectly run Ocean Crest was falling apart, literally. One night, I walked into the lobby to find half of it stripped bare, expensive hardwood flooring ripped out. Walls half painted, furniture still in boxes. The hotel had guests staying there. People who had paid top dollar to experience a luxury retreat, now dodging construction dust on their way to their rooms. The reviews started coming in. Livid, furious, scathing. Avoid at all costs. This hotel used to be incredible. But management has gone downhill. You'd be better off staying in a motel. The ratings plummeted. 5 stars. Then 4. Then 3. I watched it drop, week by week, as Noah continued to stumble his way through decisions. Cutting costs in the worst possible places. Ignoring the warnings from staff. Firing people who dared to question him. And when things got worse, when guests started canceling reservations, he blamed everyone but himself. It's the economy. It's the seasonal dip. It's the new competition in town. Competition. Me. The summit had opened 3 months ago. And it was thriving. People were raving about it. About the impeccable service. The seamless design. The attention to detail. Everything I had wanted for Ocean Crest. Everything that was now mine. I tried not to watch as Noah's arrogance turned into panic. I tried not to listen as rumors spread, staff whispering about missed payments. About delayed supply orders. About guests demanding refunds. But I wasn't blind. I saw what was happening. And so did my parents. At first, they were silent. Still in denial. Still believing Noah could turn it around. But denial only lasts so long. The night my mother finally broke was the night a VIP guest stormed out of the hotel, swearing to sue for false advertising. She had been standing at the front desk, watching it unfold, watching as Noah tried, and failed, to salvage the situation. Her face was pale, lips pressed together so tightly they almost disappeared. And when Noah turned to her, waiting for her to fix it for him, like she always had, she just shook her head. That was the night she called me. The first time she had reached out in months. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice wavering over the phone. "We need to talk." I almost laughed. Talk? Now? Where was this concern when I was the one saving the hotel? Where was this regret when they handed it to Noah on a silver platter? But still, I went. I met them at the house I had grown up in. And when I walked through the door, I knew immediately they were scared. They were finally seeing what I had known all along. My father looked older, his confidence stripped away. And my mother, she just looked tired. I sat across from them, waiting, letting them feel the weight of their own silence. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Ava," he said, voice softer than I had ever heard it. "We made a mistake." I just stared. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "We should have put you in charge from the beginning." My mother nodded, dabbing at the corner of her eye with a tissue. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We see that now." The words should have felt like victory. But they didn't. Because it was too late. Ocean Crest was collapsing under Noah's weight. And I was already building something better. "You have to come back," my mother pleaded. "We need you." The words hung between us. A year ago, I would have given anything to hear them. Now, I saw the truth. They didn't value me. They valued what I could do for them. And I had no interest in saving them from themselves. I smiled, small, polite. "I'm sorry," I said, standing, "but I have my own hotel to run." Their faces fell. Noah's reign had ended. But mine? Mine was just beginning. I never thought I'd feel pity for Noah. Not after everything he had done. Not after he had torn apart the hotel I had saved. But as I stood in the back of the ballroom that night, watching him crumble under the weight of his own incompetence. I realized that he had never been built for this world. Noah had always been reckless, arrogant, untouchable in our parents' eyes. No matter how many times he failed, they had always been there to sweep the mess under the rug, whispering reassurances that he would find his way. But this was different, because there was no fixing this. The Colorado Luxury Hotel Awards were the event of the year, an exclusive gathering of the most powerful names in the hospitality industry. For decades, Ocean Crest had been a staple at this event, a guaranteed nominee in multiple categories, and often a winner. Not this year. This year, the summit was the star. I stood with my team as the nominations for Best Boutique Hotel were read. The tension thick in the air, my hands clenched at my sides. But I kept my face composed, even as I felt my heart hammering in my chest. Then the announcement came, and the winner is the summit. The room erupted into applause, my team cheering beside me. It was real. I had done it. I walked toward the stage, keeping my steps steady, controlled, but as I passed through the tables, my eyes flickered to the back of the room, where my parents sat, their expressions frozen in shock. And Noah? Noah wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the table, gripping his drink so tightly his knuckles had gone white. I took the award with steady hands, turning to face the crowd as the applause died down. The moment felt surreal. This was the kind of recognition I had spent years dreaming of. I cleared my throat, forcing my voice to stay even. Thank you. This award isn't just for me, it's for my team. The people who believed in me when others didn't. The ones who worked tirelessly to bring the summit to life. I let my gaze sweep across the room, deliberately avoiding my parents. I also want to thank the place that first taught me about hospitality, Ocean Crest. It was my home for years. It shaped me, and while I had to find my own path, I'll always be grateful for the lessons it taught me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I knew what they were all thinking. They knew the story, the real story. They knew that Ocean Crest hadn't just lost an award tonight. It had lost everything. When I stepped off the stage, I expected Noah to be gone. But instead, he was waiting for me by the bar. His drink was still in his hand, though it looked like he hadn't taken a sip in a while. His face was flushed, not with anger, but with something far worse. Humiliation. You happy now? His voice was quiet, but laced with resentment. You got what you wanted. I tilted my head. What I wanted? He scoffed. Don't play dumb, Ava. This was your revenge, wasn't it? I let out a slow breath. No, Noah, I said, my voice calm. This was never about revenge. This was about recognition, about proving, to myself, to everyone, that I deserved a chance. A chance you were given without earning it. His eyes flickered, his grip on the glass tightening. You think you're better than me? No, I said simply. I just worked harder. For a moment, he looked like he might argue. But then his shoulders slumped, his gaze dropping. For the first time in his life, he had to face the consequences of his own failures. I didn't stay to watch him unravel. I had won. Not just an award, not just success. I had won myself back. As I walked away, I passed my parents' table. My mother reached out, as if to say something. But I didn't stop. This was my night. And for the first time, I wasn't seeking their approval. I was standing in my own light. The night was supposed to be a celebration, a grand occasion where hotel executives, investors, and industry leaders gathered to network and recognize the best of the best. But for Ocean Crest, it was the beginning of the end. I stood in the back of the ballroom, my fingers wrapped around the stem of a champagne flute, watching as the weight of reality finally crashed down on my family. For months, I had watched from the sidelines as Noah drove our family's hotel, the business I had once poured my heart and soul into, straight into the ground. But my parents had refused to see it. Even as the guest complaints piled up, even as the occupancy rates dropped, even as the summit flourished while Ocean Crest withered, they clung to the delusion that Noah would somehow pull through. Now, there was no more denying it. Because tonight, in front of everyone, the truth was on full display. A hush had fallen over the room as the nominees for Best Luxury Resort were announced. I saw my mother sitting at the table near the stage, her lips pressed together in anticipation. My father sat beside her, his posture rigid, His jaw clenched. They wanted this win desperately. It was their last hope. But I already knew what was coming. And the award goes to the Everest Resort. A roar of applause filled the ballroom as the representatives from the Everest took the stage. Grinning, shaking hands, accepting their well-earned victory. Ocean Crest's name hadn't even been mentioned. The absence was deafening. I watched as my mother stiffened, her hands gripping the edge of the table like she could physically hold onto the reputation that was slipping through her fingers. My father's expression didn't change, but I could see it in his eyes, the way the realization hit him like a gut punch. And Noah? Noah was frozen in place, staring at the stage, his face pale under the ballroom lights. This was the moment he realized he had failed. He had always walked through life untouchable, unshakable, no matter how many mistakes he made, no matter how many times he screwed up. There had always been a safety net. But now, there was no net. He wasn't just another rich kid making bad business decisions. He was the CEO who had let Ocean Crest fall apart. I set down my champagne glass and made my way toward the exit. But I had barely made it past the first row of tables when I heard my mother's voice. Sharp and urgent. Ava. I stopped. Slowly, I turned to face her. She was already on her feet, my father rising beside her. Noah was still seated, his shoulders hunched, his eyes darting toward the exits like he wanted to disappear. My mother's expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes I had never seen before. Not just desperation, not just regret. Fear. We need to talk, she said, and for the first time in my life. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. I tilted my head. Now? Yes, my father said firmly. Right now. I let out a slow breath. Then nodded once. Fine. The four of us slipped out of the ballroom and into one of the smaller, private lounge areas near the back of the venue. The door clicked shut behind us, cutting off the hum of conversation and clinking glasses from the gala outside. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my father exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his graying hair. Ava, the hotel is in trouble. I crossed my arms. I know. Noah scoffed from his chair. But he didn't say anything. My mother sat down slowly, like the weight of the evening had finally pressed her into the seat. It's worse than we thought, she admitted. The bank, she hesitated, then sighed. The bank is threatening to call in the loans. If we don't secure additional funding or find a way to turn things around in the next few months. She trailed off, but she didn't have to finish the sentence. I already knew. Ocean Crest was on the verge of collapse. I leaned against the wall, watching them carefully. So let me guess, I said slowly. You want me to come back? To clean up Noah's mess? My mother flinched, but my father nodded. We need you, Ava. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You needed me a year ago. And you chose him. Noah tensed at that, but I wasn't done. I was the one who saved that hotel. I continued, my voice low, sharp. I was the one who worked day and night to bring it back from the edge. I was the one who built relationships with vendors, improved guest experiences, made sure the place was actually running like a 5-star resort. But none of that mattered to you. I turned my gaze to my mother. Because no matter what I did, Noah was still your golden boy. My mother looked away. My father sighed. And Noah? Noah stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what? He snapped. Forget it. We don't need her. My father shot him a sharp look. Sit down. No. Noah spat. This is what she wanted, right? To watch us fail? To sit here and rub it in our faces? He turned to me, his eyes blazing. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I took a step toward him, meeting his glare head on. No, Noah, I said, my voice steady. I'm not enjoying this. I leaned in just slightly, lowering my voice. But I am watching you finally face the consequences of your own actions. His jaw clenched. For a second, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. But then he just exhaled sharply and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was heavy. I looked back at my parents. They both looked exhausted, defeated. They had spent years believing that Noah could do no wrong, that if they just kept giving him opportunity after opportunity, he would eventually rise to the occasion. But tonight had shattered that illusion. Tonight, they had been forced to face the truth. And I could see it now, the silent, sinking realization in their eyes. They had bet on the wrong child. I pushed off the wall and smoothed down my dress. "I'm not coming back," I said simply. My mother's breath hitched. My father's expression tightened. "But," I continued, "I'll give you one piece of advice." I met my father's gaze. "Sell the hotel while you still can." And with that, I turned and walked out the door, leaving them to sit in the ruins of their own making. The air in the grand ballroom was electric, charged with the weight of a moment I had been waiting for my entire life. The stage glowed beneath the chandelier's golden light, and the hum of hushed whispers filled the space as the announcer held the final envelope in his hands. I stood at my table, perfectly poised, a vision of composed confidence, though my heart pounded hard against my ribs. This was it, the moment that would finally cement my place in the industry. My name had been called before, small awards, local recognitions, but tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't just a contender. I was standing in the same room as the giants of hospitality. People who once dismissed me, who once told me I would never build anything of value. And among them, sitting stiffly at a table near the back of the room, were my parents. I hadn't expected them to come. Not after everything. My father sat with his hands folded, his expression unreadable. My mother was tense, her lips pressed into a thin line. And Noah wasn't here. I imagined he couldn't stomach the idea of sitting in a room where I was the one being celebrated. "And the award for Boutique Hotel of the Year goes to..." The announcer paused, dragging out the suspense. I held my breath. The summit. The room erupted in applause. A wave of cheers crashing over me as I exhaled sharply. I had won. I had done what no one thought possible. I had built something bigger than my parents' legacy. Bigger than Ocean Crest. Bigger than the small expectations they had for me. As I walked to the stage, I caught a glimpse of my father. His mask of indifference was slipping, his jaw tight. My mother blinked rapidly, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as if bracing for impact. And suddenly, I knew. I had never needed their approval. Their pride, their validation, their recognition. I had spent years chasing it, only to realize in this very moment that it didn't matter anymore. Because this was mine. I stepped up to the podium, the weight of my victory settling over my shoulders. As the applause died down, I took a slow breath and leaned into the microphone. "Success," I began, my voice steady, "isn't about being handed an opportunity. It's about creating one." A ripple of agreement moved through the audience. I let my gaze drift over the crowd, lingering just for a second on my parents before continuing. When I was told I wasn't the right person to lead my family's hotel, I had two choices. I could accept that decision, or I could prove them wrong. My mother flinched. My father's fingers curled into a fist against the tablecloth. I smiled. I chose to build something of my own. Something stronger. Something smarter. Something built on real leadership. The audience applauded again, but I wasn't finished. I want to dedicate this award to my team, the people who believed in my vision before the world did. You are the reason the summit exists. And I am endlessly grateful. My staff erupted in cheers. And then, after a deliberate pause, I added, "And to every woman who has ever been told she isn't enough, may you always remember that you are." A standing ovation. As I left the stage, I felt my entire body vibrating with adrenaline. It was done. The world saw me for who I was now. I wasn't just my parents' daughter. I wasn't the shadow behind Noah. I was the woman who built an empire. The celebration was in full swing by the time I stepped outside for a breath of air. Champagne glasses clinked, music played, and my team laughed and toasted inside. But I needed a moment alone. I hadn't been out there for more than a minute when I heard the door open behind me. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. "I suppose congratulations are in order," my father said, his voice carefully measured. I glanced over my shoulder. He looked aged. The past year had not been kind to him. The burden of Noah's failures, of Ocean Crest's collapse, had taken its toll. "It's a little late for that," I said coolly, turning to face him fully. My mother hovered behind him, unsure whether she should step forward or stay back. She looked tired, her usual elegance dimmed by the weight of the evening. "Claire," she tried, her voice softer than I expected. I arched an eyebrow. "We were wrong," she admitted, her gaze darting away as if the words physically pained her. A year ago, that sentence would have meant everything to me. Now? It meant nothing. I smiled politely. I know. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, my father sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Ocean Crest is being sold. I nodded, unsurprised. It was inevitable. His jaw clenched. He didn't like hearing it from me. But he knew I was right. My mother hesitated. Then sighed. We just thought you should know. I studied them for a moment. Once upon a time, I would have seen this as an opportunity to fix things. I would have taken this as a sign that they were finally willing to acknowledge my worth. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I had fought for everything I had. I had built the summit without them. And I would never let them diminish my success by acting like they were ready to accept it now. I appreciate the update, I said smoothly, but I have a celebration to get back to. I turned, walking toward the door. Claire, my mother called after me. I paused but didn't look back. Are we ever going to fix this? She asked quietly. I smiled. Just a little. I don't think so. Then I stepped inside, back to my real family. The people who had believed in me. The people who had fought beside me. The people who had helped me win. And as the door swung shut behind me, I felt it completely, fully, without question. I had won.